Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome to this YouTube channel on narcissism. If you're new, please subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of this community. So this video is on something that more than a few people who are co-parenting with a narcissist have brought up to me, and whether they're married, in a relationship, not in a relationship. I want to talk a little bit about how it feels when you feel like your child is lashing against you, and it feels like they often do that as a way to kind of earn their narcissistic parents' love. Let's break this down. Many people say that parenting is the hardest job in the world. I'm going to say that it would be parenting with a narcissist would be the hardest of the hardest, jobs of the world. But for a child to have a narcissistic parent is also a terrible legacy. But one of the greatest sources of grief for people enduring narcissistic abuse who are co-parenting with a narcissist is when your child or your children seem to sort of defend their narcissistic parent, or even seemingly ally with the narcissistic parent, or come at you as a way to build that alliance. You may get blamed for the family getting broken up, or they may be hearing a narrative from the narcissistic parent who blames you for breaking up the family. Or the child, trying to find meaning and make sense of the situation, might see you as an easier scapegoat and tell a narrative around it being you who's being the one responsible for that. In many cases, the non-narcissistic parent doesn't leave a narcissistic marriage and may be depleted and exhausted under the pressure of trying to stay in a narcissistic relationship, raise children, and not get lost in the grief and emotional abuse of it all. Children may view the non-narcissistic parent through unkind eyes, perhaps frustrated with the parent's sadness and anxiety, and may even be quite invalidating of this parent, whom they may view as being indecisive or weak. A lack of empathy can seemingly pervade the child. They're probably mirroring what they observe and what is being mirrored by their narcissistic parent. The child may not understand narcissistic abuse and the toll it takes, though they may recognize that they're never quite happy in this family. And because the narcissistic parent is a lot more manipulative, that parent may be able to paint a portrait of you, the other healthier parent, as a downer, or even scapegoating the non-narcissistic parent, making jokes at that parent's expense, and creating alliances with the children who fall for the narcissistic parent's narrative. You may also face a situation with a golden child or a brainwashed child who actually fully allies with the narcissistic parent and may step into that child may step into the trauma-bonded role you once had in the job of constantly reassuring that narcissistic parent and providing validation. Now, here is where the family roles that kids may take on, scapegoat, fixer, etc., can become quite important, as does the temperament of the children. Unlike the adults around you, children are not going to understand narcissistic abuse. It's just simply too much developmentally to expect a child to comprehend the impacts of a personality style like narcissism on another parent. They just aren't mini trauma therapists. No child should be having to do that. And I'll be frank with you, most adults don't get it. However, the confusion of having a narcissistic parent often means that the children need a safe target for their confusion and for their anger about their situation, and the non-narcissistic parent, who often feels safer, takes the heat. In a way, a child approaches all of this from a fantasy kind of mindset. Your children, if you're married to a narcissist or co-parenting with one, they want a different childhood, and that's impossible to give them. They may try to tell themselves stories to neutralize the obvious toxicity of the narcissistic parent, to ease the cognitive dissonance for them. And part of that storytelling is often coming after you. Because if you, as the healthier parent, can be written into the story as the bad one, then the narcissistic parent can be the good one, and the child can actually make an alliance with that parent. Some children have more empathy than other children, and unfortunately, the other children may have elements of the narcissistic parent's temperament. I mean, temperament's a bit of a coin flip. Golden children may really be benefiting from the manipulative generosity of the narcissistic parents. Brainwashed children look like indoctrinated cult members, so they may be all but impossible to bring around to any kind of sort of more circumscribed way of thinking. Some children in the fixer role or the helper or the scapegoat, those kids may see it clearly, but some may still be really aggravated by the mess that the family situation is in, and they still may disrespect and have a go at the non-narcissistic parent. Because remember, having a go at the narcissistic parent is not an option. Their rage is too terrifying. So in the midst of experiencing the never-ending stress of a narcissistic relationship and having to co-parent, and then on top of that to have to experience disrespect, blame, and the onslaught of your children defending the narcissistic co-parent can feel like utter devastation. Many survivors who are already blaming themselves will find that the blame of their children magnifies the narcissistic abuse. The children are confused if the narcissistic parent is not only feeding them lies, but if they're also witnessing the empathic parent's struggles and they can't contextualize them. As a result, people who experience these reactions and this mistreatment, if you're a parent experiencing these reactions and mistreatment from your children, you may attempt to force yourself to cheer up. And that's actually quite challenging because at some point, a parent enduring narcissistic abuse and the onslaught from their children will not be able to maintain the facade. Remember, the narcissistic parent may be getting even more validation from just watching the kids have a go at you, so it gets to become a very toxic cycle. Obviously, this will play out differently depending on the age of the child. Younger children may simply be confused and frustrated by the situation, and they may act out. Adolescents are the ones most likely to give you a run for your money. That's what adolescents do. The toxic psychology of these situations affect adolescents in a more recognizable way. If the narcissistic parent wants to win the adolescent over, let's face it, adolescents are definitely more easily manipulatable with money. Adolescents already take cheap shots at their parents on a good day, and they're often looking for their own scapegoats. Adolescents still aren't able to fully articulate their frustration at the situation, but if you are the parent, you're the one who has the empathy, you definitely become the easier target. Remember, adolescents are 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the family nest, and the demands of a narcissistic system make that journey towards individuation all the more difficult. And once again, here is a video. I gotta own it. I kind of suck because I don't have an answer on this one. There's not a lot of easy paths forward from this. One path, obviously, is therapy for you, for your children, and even for you and your children together, just so there's a referee in the room. But you gotta make sure that this therapist understands narcissism and the associated dynamics, or otherwise the therapy is just going to become one more invalidating space. But remember, it's not unusual for a narcissistic parent to sort of sneer and look contemptuously at therapy and may blockade your attempts to do this for your children. A second path is a sort of different kind of radical acceptance. Not the radical acceptance that your children won't change, but that while they are going through their developmental processes, that there may not be much you can do or say to turn things around. You can't call their other parent a narcissist. I know you want to, but you can't. You can, however, maintain empathy, be consistent, be available, not allow yourself to get baited by them, but you're also not superhuman. And this idea of you being a cheery person while you're a punching bag and being maltreated and buffeted, not just by the co-parent, but by other broken systems, like the courts, is not only inauthentic, but it's a bit of a stretch. And if one more person tells survivors out there, just put on a happy face, honestly, my head is going to explode. It's enough to have to radically accept, but now survivors are supposed to have the responsibility of making everyone else in the family comfortable by being cheerful. I don't think so. So many people who are co-parenting with a narcissist, they obviously want to get it right. Many of you made many sacrifices, whether that was staying in an emotionally abusive marriage or taking on the brutality of the family court system to try and give your children a better life. But you may still be taking the slings and arrows of your children who obviously wanted a different setup at home. Grief and guilt about what has unfolded can also overwhelm, but also against this backdrop of children who continue to use the narcissistically abused parent as a punching bag is sadly quite normative. Having children is a massive leap of faith, and with narcissistic abuse as a backdrop, it's a leap of faith into a black hole. The story can end in many ways: estranged children, forgiving children, children who finally see it, children who grow up into adults who finally have the capacity for regulation and clarity. And on top of the many burdens you have, in addition to co-parenting with a narcissist, the waiting and hoping, because you have to wait for that child to settle into their personality. That waiting is painful because you simply don't know where it's going to land. Lots of people out there talk on and on about faith. These situations with your children within narcissistic relationships may be one of the most compelling tests of faith I have ever witnessed. And the 1-2 punch of having to endure narcissistic abuse and then having to be painted as the bad one or the sad one or the unfun one, cumulatively, that can feel really difficult. So again, just to go back to it again, that the child will often go at the healthier parent and almost make an alliance, seemingly, with the narcissistic parent, or may not even make that alliance, but still go at you. The narcissistic parent, every child has a little bit of truth teller in them. They know something's not right, but that's a really uncomfortable position for a child to be, the cognitive dissonance. To release the tension of the cognitive dissonance, what do? They have a go at you. They basically shape you into the sort of bad person in this. Because first of all, strangely enough, you're a safer target, but it also helps release some of the tension over how bad that narcissistic parent is. It's again, having to bear up against narcissistic abuse and then having to do this analysis when your kids may be coming at you. It's a really tall order. So it's not meant, I'm not even saying like, you'll be able to cope with it better, but at least to understand the dynamic. So when it's happening, you can take a different path than self-blame and feeling that you're responsible, and that there's something you can do, or even personalizing it, but rather see it as a very, very distorted, harmful survival strategy on the part of your kids, and that you can only just sort of grind into that radical acceptance and sort of figure out how you're going to continue to survive in this relationship while giving your kids as decent a start as you can. Thanks again.